Hello, my name is Angelia Mitchell. I am currently a graduate student at Morningside College. I am also a special education teacher at Sedlow Intermediate. The title of my project is Comparing the Effectiveness of Guided Math Instruction and Direct Instruction for At-Risk 7th Grade Students. Just a little background. The National Center for Educational Statistics noted qualitative data that determined low achievement in math education across the United States in grade levels from 4th to 12th grade. The Organization Program for International Student Assessment also noted that the United States 15-year-old students ranked number 25 out of 30 in math among industrialized countries. So the why behind the reason that I chose this topic. I am currently teaching 7th grade math, and my co-teacher and I were beginning to merge into the same classroom. Whereas we were independent and had our own classrooms and our own classroom management and our own instruction styles, we were merging into the same classroom where we were having to feel out what styles of teaching we were going to use for new co-taught classroom. And the reason for the math background, obviously, because I'm teaching 7th grade math currently. Response to intervention and multi-tiered system of supports were implemented in districts and schools in an attempt to raise scores and provide students with the supports needed to be proficient in their grade level and Common Core standards. One of these interventions may include the use of guided math groups in the classroom as an intervention for improving student scores. So in some classrooms and in some districts, guided groups is already being used as an intervention. One study's results showed that students in the inclusive general education setting earned a subtotal of 5 and 67/100ths, while in the separate or resource room setting earned a subtotal of 1 and 76/100ths on a fraction computation assessment. So while this is one example, for this research it was important to understand the implications for special education students and regular education students because our classroom includes both. This particular study indicated students in the inclusive classroom are more successful, and actually those students who are provided adequate and effective teaching strategies within an inclusive co-taught classroom. So this project or research focuses on two types of instruction, direct instruction and guided groups. Two sources here. One study conducted by authors Goldschmidt, Scharfenberger, and Bogner concluded that while there were many acceptable forms of teaching, new material, the best method is teacher-guided instruction. A little bit about that. Direct instruction is typically where the teacher provides the material, usually on a whiteboard or a smartboard, whatever materials they have available, while students actively listen or take notes. There may be some time given for individual practice, but there is very limited or not at all interaction with peers. For guided groups, this other study reported that only positive effects have been observed while discussing the benefits of cooperative learning. Cooperative learning is defined as one instructional learning strategy that has been used. It utilizes students' small group work where students help each other discover and work through the instructional material. So the purpose of this study was to determine if guided math groups are an effective intervention for improving students' Ames Web Math Concepts and Applications Assessment, or MCAP for short, in a mixed population of at-risk 7th grade students. So the intent of the research was to determine which method of instruction was most effective in our classroom, then provide that insight for our colleagues and possibly even our district colleagues, not just our school. My hypothesis was that participants in the study would have a greater increase of Ames Web scores after participating in guided math groupings in a mixed population of at-risk 7th grade students. My independent variable was the use of guided math groups, and the dependent variable was student assessment results. So the hopes was that in the end of this study, the results could be used to help teachers make decisions about the best type of instruction that will suit the needs of their students individually. And so that was the hope that we would be able to pass that information along to other teachers. So for the purpose of this research, my participants were 7th grade students in 2 separate classes. Within our school, we have 57% Caucasian students, 19% African American students, 14% Hispanic students, and 8% who identify as 2 or more races. Of 954 students, 51% of those students are considered low income or qualifying for free or reduced lunch, and 22% are diagnosed with a disability. However, within our classroom setting, about 54% of students have a diagnosed disability or are receiving accommodations with an IEP. The materials that we used were Ames Web Math Concepts and Applications Assessments, and that was used as a pre and a post test for both the control and the experimental group. The participants came at a regular scheduled math class for 47 minutes per day for each week. So the students came to us 5 days a week for 47 minutes for 8 weeks total for the experiment. Prior to receiving any kind of math curriculum, they were given the pre-test, again, that Ames Web MCAP assessment, and then they were given that as a post-test at the end of the 8-week trial period. My control group. The control group received regular math curriculum in the form of direct instruction. So again, that is where the teacher is just providing the material, typically on the whiteboard or the smartboard, and the students are engaging in that curriculum, but they're not engaging with each other or with their peers at all. That curriculum that was delivered was Glencoe Math Curriculum, as well as the Priority Math Common Core Standards that our district outlined. For the experimental group, after the pretest was given, they received instruction through the use of guided groups. Students were split into 4 groups of similar ability. Then the 2 groups began class with a teacher-directed instruction in their small group time, and then they rotated halfway through the class period to an independent practice time where they were able to work with their peers on the practice from the material that the teacher has provided them with, but they were not able to access the teacher during that time. They could come afterwards, though, after their group. So then the next day, the students would begin the next day with a teacher and with a different teacher, because there are 2 teachers in the room, and in a second independent practice time. Progress was monitored through the pre- and post-test using Ames Web. This assessment was used at the conclusion of the 8-week intervention, the data was analyzed at the conclusion of the 8-week intervention, but I used Ames Web because the content that is on that is based on the National Council for Teachers of Mathematics Standards and the National Resource Council. In addition, it is designed using the Stafford Achievement Test 10th edition as a guide because it is widely used as a norm referenced assessment. So it was both reliable and held validity for the purpose of this research. And here's just not sure what happened there. It stopped recording, but I think because I touched it. So on the left side of the screen is just the first page of the assessment, and then on the right side is what the scoring page would look like. So the results of this study did not demonstrate significant growth in either the control or the experimental group, so the hypothesis was not confirmed. However, all students did show growth. So after the study was completed, there's a table on the left side and a graph on the right side. It's important to note just the growth that is visibly seen here. Well, this is the pre-test of the post-test of the control group, so they did grow. And then here's the pre-test of the experimental group and the post-test of the experimental group. So both groups did show growth in the end. The socio-constructivism theory or point of view focuses on the understanding of the development of understanding as a community, so that students are able to learn from each other, the teacher is able to provide the learning, but there is learning for both individuals and group learning through peer interactions, small group learning, and just sort of learning as a community. So that was sort of the basis for why I wanted to see if guided groups was effective. And while they are effective, this research does not prove that they are any more effective as direct instruction. But there were some implications for the research. This research reinforced the advantages of a low teacher to student ratio. With that lower ratio, because the students were broken up through guided groups, the students were able to ask questions and then receive immediate feedback. Those were very valuable for both our students, but also us as teachers, as well as the close monitoring, and there was less distractions because there was a more focused group of instruction happening while they were working with the teachers, and then also in the independent practice times where they were able to work with their peers. In addition, less distractions with the movement, the students being able to get up in the middle of the period and then change to a different table, that really helped cut down on distractions also. The teachers benefited through the use of meeting school and district goals by implementing this intervention. Plus, we had better teacher and student interactions because we would cut down on the number of corrective feedback that we were having to give to students due to less distractions and just being in closer position with these students. We were able to provide more positive feedback for them, so that was helpful. In addition, because there are two teachers in the room, the general education teacher really played the role as the content specialist, and then the co-teacher was able to provide individual needs for the special education students. So my co-teacher, the general education teacher, was able to provide the curriculum standard and that instruction in her group, and then I was able to provide some scaffolding and skill areas where our special education students needed some more assistance. Some limitations. Really the biggest limitation, I think, for this project was the time constraint. Since we only had 8 weeks to complete, this project would have probably been better served as a year-long project, or maybe different types of groupings. So this group periods of our own, but I think using 2 different class periods caused some dynamics issues. So we had one group that was much more chatty or talkative, and so that just provided some students who did not increase their score may have a greater skill deficit. This is really important to recognize because our IEP numbers are so high. Our ratio of students with IEPs was so much higher. 54% is pretty high for a classroom. This was important to recognize because those students were lacking underlying baseline skills. They did not have the scaffolding to be able to complete some of the 7th grade curriculum material without proper instruction prior to. So some recommendations would be making the length of the study just longer, maybe making it a full school year or further than that even. Also following students through multiple math classes, so 6th, 7th, 8th grade perhaps, or a larger group of participants. So maybe compare all of mine and my co-teachers' sections and another set of co-teachers and see which intervention was more effective. Also, really recognizing that these students with IEPs, especially since our class had such a high percentage of students with IEPs, recognizing that should have been more directly focused on in this project would be another recommendation. So that's the conclusion of this project. Here are some references. Thank you.